and to officers. This meeting is being webcast. I'm going to begin by outlining the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of the alarm sounding again, please leave the room calmly via the lobby and the main front door of City Hall, then turn right, walk down the ramp towards the cathedral where you'll find the assembly point. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence and substitutions. We've received apologies from Councillor Paul Goggin, with Councillor Kerry Bales substituting. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Eddy.
It's not actually an apology, Chairman, but in the absence of the Labour members, I wondered whether they were boycotting your committee like they did DCB.
If they are, I've certainly not heard of it. Okay. Let's move on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do members of the committee have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on today's agenda? Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. There's one set of minutes to be approved, and that's from the meeting held on the 14th of February 2025. I move those minutes as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Eddy, thank you. Members, are you content to confirm these minutes as a correct record to be signed by me as chair? Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item 5, this is Chair's announcements. I've got a few things that I'd like to bring members' attention to. The first is that the Council's response to the report produced by MedAct and Acorn on Barton House has now been published on the Council's website. Letters with that response have been hand-delivered to residents, including translations, and we'll be engaging further with residents over the coming weeks. The Council has launched a new online service to help residents with any housing problem. This service makes it easier for residents to access advice and help needed at the earliest opportunity. And it helps householders to find solutions or alternative accommodation before homelessness occurs. This has been produced as part of the Council's Tackling Homelessness Programme, and it's created in partnership with a company called Advice Aid. Also like to make members aware that we've successfully completed, as indicated that they're attending, is Dan Ackroyd. So Dan, you asked 3 questions and you've received written responses. So you have the opportunity to ask up to 2 supplementary questions. And hopefully you'll be able to get access to a microphone soon. Thank you.
So yeah, for question 7, the answer given is quite terrible. It provides none of the detail asked for. Every committee meeting, major piece of work get delayed without that being brought to Council's attention and without any comment. At the last committee meeting in February, the mitigating action of implementation of the NEC housing system said that this action had a due date of 28th of March this year. What's actually going to happen if the IT migration isn't ready for October 2025?
Thank you very much, Dan, for that question. Fiona, would you like to respond to that? I think you're probably best placed.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the IT implementation, the work is ongoing, and you've asked the question what would happen if the work wasn't completed in time for go live. We're working very proactively with NEC, the service provider, and we brought in extra specialists within the team to try and make sure that we get everything done before the deadline. So the only thing that I can say in response to that is to give assurance that we're working and we will get things completed before deadline.
Thank you. And Dan, you have a second supplementary question, if you like.
So a refusal to answer the question. I mean, this is a very clear risk to the council that the IT system might not be ready, what's going to happen? Are we going to have to spend a huge amount of money in an emergency situation, or are the workers going to have to use an IT system that's not quite ready? What's going to happen?
So, in response, in terms of the IT system being ready, the intention is that the IT system will be ready and we will be able to go live with that system before September, when the old system will come to an end. So, you know, the response is that the IT system will be ready. Right, we're working towards a new go-live date, so we haven't set a new go-live date as yet, because we want to make sure that we've got the report details that we need fully implementable before the go-live date. So, as yet, we haven't set a new go-live date. We're pending that at the moment with NEC.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your questions, Dan. So Dan was the only...
First of all, I have to register a complaint that I don't think that question was answered at all properly. This committee should know what's going to happen. It's a huge amount of money that might need to be spent in an emergency situation.
Thanks, Dan.
It's a ridiculous situation for this.
You have a statement, I think, which you've also submitted, so you'll be able to speak to that later on. But we'll move on to
I have a second supplementary.
So you've had two supplementary questions
No,
already.
I've not had an answer. I'm going to ask my second supplementary.
We're going to move on to our next questioner now, Dan, I'm afraid, because you have asked two supplementary questions.
Barry
now.
Parsons, you are failing as a chair of this committee. I am trying to get answers.
Dan, you've asked two supplementary questions now, and we are going to move on to our next questioner. So the next questioner... I'm sorry, Dan. We aren't going to tolerate disruption to this committee meeting.
Councillor Parsons.
So I'm going to respectfully ask that you stop speaking now, so that we can continue with the business of the meeting.
Councillor Parsons, there's only a few people asking questions. Can I submit to ask that we allow the person who's come here willingly to speak?
I'm going to follow.
But honestly, there's only a few people.
I'm going to follow the procedure, which is
the procedure is that you
members
have
of the public.
the chair has.
Sorry, when the chair is speaking,
can
please
make
be
a
quiet.
decision. You don't have to follow procedure. You are the chair. You can make a choice. We have one person that wants to ask one question.
Can we
the question.
please have quiet, because the chair is speaking, and you have to go through the chair. That's how a meeting works. Okay? So we're going to move on to our next questioners. Now, Dan was the only... I'm sorry, Dan, but we are going to have to adjourn the meeting if disruption continues. Okay? So I don't want to do that, because I want us to be able to get through the meeting with members of the public in the gallery. So I'm going to ask that you sit down, and we can move on to our next speaker.
Chair,
I'm afraid I'm going to have to...
30 minutes between three people.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to adjourn unless we can follow the business of the meeting as per the procedure. Okay?
But Councillor Parsons, you
Sorry,
are
this
the
is not
chair.
a debate.
You don't
Okay,
have
I'm
to
going to
follow
adjourn the
procedure.
meeting now, I'm
You
afraid. meeting. Thank you for your patience, everybody. So, what I would like to do is to move on to the next person who's submitted a question, and if there is time, we can then go back to Dan, and you can ask your further supplementary question. So, so I can see that there are other people in the public gallery who have asked questions, and so I've got Joe Banks on my list. I don't think Joe is here, and then I've got Fadimo Farah. Fadimo, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
John Smith and Fiona Lester, you have failed us, and you need to resign. Would you resign?
I'm afraid, Fadimo, I don't think that's a fair question to ask. I really don't. Do you have a second supplementary question?
Yeah. We've given you the evidence what Parton House are going through. We've brought the health professionals to tell you exactly what we're going through. Mm-hmm. Our children are suffering. You need to stop adultification of the black children. Why are you not giving us Band 1? Why do you refuse to give us Band 1?
Okay, so we've recently published our response to the report that MedAct and Acorn produced on Barton House, and that does include some proposed actions around home choice banding, around rehousing for Barton House residents. It's a complex issue because the home choice system has to be managed through rules in a way that's fair to everybody, but we've published our response, and we're going to be consulting further on those proposals, and we're also going to be engaging a lot more with Barton House residents about those proposals and the other recommendations in that report. Thank you. Okay. So I don't think there is anybody else in the public gallery who has either a question or a statement, with the exception of Dan. So Dan, if you would like to ask your third supplementary question, it may be that we have to go away and produce a written response for you, but we will endeavour to get responses for you.
Okay, thanks. The answer to question 9 is just gobbledygook as well. The Housing Act 1985, section 105, subsection 5 says, "A landlord shall publish details of the arrangements which it makes under this section related to consulting the public, and a copy of the documents shall be published to be made available at the authority's principal office." Where is Bristol City's Council arrangements for consultation, please?
Are you talking about arrangements for consultation specifically on resident engagement? Because
I'm specifically asking about Housing Act, section 105, subsection 5.
Because I think I can answer in relation to the resident engagement task and finish group, which is the subject of your question 9.
Specifically related to Housing Act 1985, section 105, subsection 5, which says the council will have arrangements, and those arrangements will be published.
Yeah, so the way that a task and finish group works is that's a group of councillors that meets to consider evidence and then makes recommendations to the committee. If there are to be changes to the way that the council engages with residents that require consultation, then that will be the time that consultation happens. So there is nothing happening in the resident engagement task and finish group that would require consultation. I hope that's helpful.
It's not. I asked very specifically, where is the council's arrangements published under that specific rule? I'll follow it up by email.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
The council's breaking the law here again.
All right, thanks, Dan. So we'll move on now to public forum statements. And we've received a large number of statements, but I don't see in the public gallery, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ian White's, David Coates, Miriam Hollingdale's, or Erica Dupes. So in that case then, our final statement from someone who's indicated they're going to attend is Dan. Dan Ackroyd, would you like to speak to your statement on the response to the MEDAC report? You can either read your statement if you would prefer, or you can speak to it. We ask that you try and keep your words reasonably concise. Thank you.
This committee has had almost a year to sort its act out. Your apology, without acknowledging the specific harm caused, looks like a form of strategic appeasement. The apology is issued with the intent of delaying the matter rather than addressing it properly. This committee, as we've just seen, is still not getting a clear picture of the housing department and failing to get basic points of information into the public. This committee is still doing a terrible job, and I don't understand the decisions you're making.
Thank you, Dan. That concludes public forum for today. I would just also like to mention that we received around 8 public statements late, so they weren't accepted to this meeting, but residents have been advised of this and asked if they'd like to submit their statement for the next Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. Thank you. We're moving on now then to agenda item 7, and that is the Finance Report Update. This report presents to the committee the Housing and Landlord Services financial forecast at period 10 against the approved budget as at the end of May 2024. This is a non-key decision and the report is for noting. I'm going to invite Martin Johnson, Finance Manager, to introduce and outline the report. Martin has a number of slides which will be presented on the screens, but also members those have been shared with you in advance, so you ought to be able to follow along on your own devices. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just waiting for the presentation to come up. Sorry, I'm just... Okay, thank you, Chair. So, as Chair's mentioned, the Period 10 Finance Report reports on the General Fund revenue and capital position and the revenue and capital position of the HRA. At Period 10, the General position was an overspend of 3.2 million and capital was showing an underspend of 6.2 million. The HRA revenue forecast at Period 10 was for a £12.2 million overspend and capital underspend of 6.2 million. The reason for the forecast overs and unders are detailed within the report, and I'll take any questions on them a little later. But just as a reminder, whilst the main report focuses on the forecast position at a point in time, it's commentary on the movement and direction of travel between reporting periods. So this presentation discusses the movements between Period 9 and Period 10. And just as another quick reminder, Sorry, we seem to be on the summary page there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so members have the presentation in their pack, so hopefully they can just follow along. And apologies, there seems to be yet another IT gremlin. The top part of the slides in the presentation show the overall movement in forecast for the service as a whole between period 9 and period 10. The bottom portion of the slide shows where within these services the movements have arisen. So general fund revenue between period 9 and period 10, the overall movement in the forecast is a reduction in the overspend of 0.2 million. 0.1 million of this relates to a net movement within housing options, being a reduction of subsidy loss of circa 0.5 million, offset by the repayment of an historic grant from 22-23, which was reclaimed by MHCLG of 0.4 million. Private and accessible housing saw a small reduction in forecast salary costs of 0.1 million. General fund capital is seeing a reduction of 1.4 million forecast between periods 9 and periods 10. Private housing has seen a reduction of 0.8 million as the anticipated additional funding to meet high demand was lower than previously estimated. The housing delivery programme is forecasting a further reduction in spend of 0.6 million by the end of the year. This is slippage in the programme. The cultural hub at Philwood is seeing delays as tendered prices have been returned higher than budget, and a value engineering exercise is underway to close this gap, leading to 0.4 million being slipped. Grants to RPs is seeing 0.3 million slipped into future years for the sites being delivered by community-led housing organisations, though grant agreements have now been signed for these. These are offset by minor variations totaling 0.1 million across multiple other schemes. HRA revenue is forecasting an improvement of 0.3 million in period 10 compared to period. Income has increased by 0.4 million as we now have a full year's worth of transactions and so are now better able to estimate the final position on service charges. Repairs are now forecast to be 1.2 million lower. This is due to lower than previously forecast spend on the backlog of repairs and the impact of previously forecast opportunities around capitalisation now being included within the forecast. These reductions are offset by a further increase of 0.9 million in waking watch costs as a result of ongoing delays in installations and issues with some alarms already installed, requiring waking watch to be reintroduced in a number of blocks. Since period 10, it has been confirmed that rebates will be received for these faulty alarms, which will be reflected in the year-end position. In addition to the increased waking watch, the previously forecast underspend against electricity has been reduced by 0.3 million, leading to an increase in forecast costs. On HRA capital, total movement between the periods is 5.1 million, and relates to slippage. The most significant variances within the home improvement programme relates to kitchen, bathroom, window and heating installations, as well as rewires of 0.9 million. Block refurbishments totalling 0.6 million and fire alarm installs of 0.7 million are offset by an increase to major adaptations to meet rising demand of 0.9 million, as well as an acceleration of some energy efficiency works of 0.2 million. The largest movements in forecasts for the development programme relate to reductions on the Philwood Cinema, Romney House, Cameron Centre and Accelerated Acquisitions Programme. This is offset by accelerated spend against the street acquisitions and Edderoth site. However, it is worth noting there are a significant number of movements in the forecast between P9 and P10, and the schedule of all movements and explanations can be provided to the committee if they so wish. In summary, whilst the position has improved since the previous forecasting period, there remains a significant overspend, a large proportion of which we still expect to carry over into future years, contributing to the lack of resilience within the plan for a minimum period of 3 years. As a reminder, the HRA needs to generate £8 million of savings in 25-26 and £10 million in 26-27 in order to maintain its reserves and allow borrowing to fund the capital programme. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. So now we have an opportunity for members to ask any questions or make any comments you would like to. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please indicate to me, and also indicate if you'd like to ask any follow-up questions. Thank you. So I can see I've got a hand from Councillor Eddy first.
Martin, firstly, thank you for your presentation. It does seem that the gods of the IT world conspire against you particularly. I don't have any particular questions. I've asked this before, you will be aware, but a few comments. Firstly, I'd like to thank you and your team for actually your robust stewardship of our finances. Certainly, I know particularly in the run-up to the budget in February, it's been very stressful. And I note you used to have until last autumn jet black hair, so perhaps that's a measure, of course. Seriously, though, clearly, although, well, in my view, well managed, we have overspends from housing options, of course, which weren't unexpected. But can I remind members that although we're not unique in that, we have set some robust arrangements in place for actually tackling homelessness and temporary accommodation, including actually the provision of general needs housing, of course. So I'm not complacent, but I have real hope and an expectation that we can actually address that issue over the coming months and years. Obviously, on the capital side, we've seen a slippage, but also some strategic changes as far as housing delivery, and that's been helpful in terms of the financial position. But we need to address that in the current financial year. I'm also conscious if we're going to get the HRA back fit for purpose over the next couple of years, we need to actually look at practically every penny of expenditure forensically. So that's going to be the task set before this committee.
Thank you, Richard. Would other members like to ask questions or comment? I've got Councillor Thomas first.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think what I'm most concerned about, given the one of the things I'm most concerned about, given the historical performance, is just hitting the budgets that we've set. And actually, it looks like the overspends are, well, it's been quite the direction of travel on overspend is being shown quite clearly in what you've provided, and it looks like some of those most expensive budgets are a bit more under control, and there are fewer nasty surprises happening. So I think there's some kind of, it feels like there's a reasonably tight grip there, and there are kind of underspends in capital areas, which is about getting more discipline into our project management. But things only become possible once the budgets are under greater control, and we're closer to hitting budget each month. So yeah, thank you for the report.
Councillor Chabalala next.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, with this report here, clearly we're seeing a number of projects moving on, and that may impact on the 2025-2026 budget. Do you have a rough idea of how much of that project spend would impact our 2025 budget?
Not right now. We're still going through year end to establish the final position. The only thing that I am aware of right now is that the development programme is looking at an outturn of around 67 million. So that would be approximately £2 million worth of slippage into next year. But it's not really a pressure on the budgets because of the way that capital works. So it hasn't been spent this year, it's set aside for next year. So there's no real negative impact on the finances, other than it's just the timing of when the cash goes out the door.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, I've got a subsequent question.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I guess the issue here is, as my colleague was saying about project management, is to really think about the sizes of the projects that we're moving forward to reduce slippage, and making sure that we have some sort of reality check. So this also links to Nick in terms of performance, that we have some sort of reality check with what can be delivered at best public value budget versus over-egged ideas, because we can see what that actually then costs.
So certainly when it came to setting the 25-26 budget, there was a lot of scrutiny on deliverability. That was one of the major considerations. The development budget, for example, for 25-26 is around about 80 million before any slippage. We're actually in contract for all of that amount.
Yeah.
So where the slippage comes in there is it's not through sort of ambitions to get schemes going. These schemes are already going. It's around about deliverability, and all sorts of things can impact that. The weather can impact it. The labour market can impact it.
Yeah.
And some of these things are, because we have development partners, some of these things are not entirely within our control. But certainly I take on board your point, but just to assure you that there was a lot of scrutiny on what we can actually deliver when setting the 25-26 capital budget.
I think I'm really happy. Final question, Chair. I'm really happy with the 2025-2026 budget. For so long as we stay quite realistic within that, we should be able to deliver that quite smoothly. Clearly, the prehistoric budgeting and project sizes has got an ongoing impact. As you've mentioned, it's lingering on for at least 3+ years. I think that is quite a huge concern, and there's lessons to be learned around managing projects, the staff capacity, and actually setting goals. So just to be noted that it'd be good now that with the new directorate to really make sure that we've got a very clear oversight on our project management and deliverables. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's continue then. I mean, I think as has been said, we have a great deal of challenges and headwinds that are forthcoming. We can expect, I think, a continuation of pressures on our homelessness services due to the worsening economic outlook and the impacts of some of the benefit changes that have recently been announced. And I'd note as well that our reserves position for the housing revenue account is extremely tight for the next 7 years, according to our forecasts. So we need to be vigilant, and we need to make sure that we have really strong financial controls to make sure that we're operating within the limits that we have, so that we can deliver the improved services that we need for our residents. With that in mind, I'd like to read the recommendations in the report, which is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report on the P10 forecast for housing and landlord services. Thank you. Let's move on then to agenda item 8, which is the performance management report. Now, this report is to brief the committee on the performance against the Council's business plan as relevant to the remit of this committee for Q3 2024-25. This report is an opportunity for members to note areas of specific interest or concern to review progress with relevant directors. And I'm going to invite Nick Smith, who is Strategic Intelligence and Performance Manager, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, as said, this is the performance report Q3 against the corporate business plan. Before I look at the report, just a general point to note for the committee is, as you probably were, in next month, the new corporate strategy will be coming to full council. Once that's ratified, there'll then be a formal process to develop a new business plan and a new suite of performance metrics for the years to come. Currently, we're obviously reporting against the existing plan for as we are now. So, you know, as is always the case, the cover report there, pages 42 and 43 have got several points that are highlighted there. Some of them are positive, some are negatives. But of course, even where they're negative in terms of how they're doing against the target, there may well be positives being noted within that, and vice versa. A good example, I think, is the reducing empty council houses percentage of total stock. That's been behind target all year this year, but it's noted that it is significantly better than the national average. So, there's definitely positives in there, and that point about looking afresh with directors and councillors on the target setting process as we get into the years to come will be a key part of setting this. And of course, as is always the case, there are the two appendices that have got all the details on everything in the business plan and the ones particular for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm going to go to Councillor Bales first.
I wanted to ask how many council homes are empty and why they're empty. Or is it because tenants have just left and not told you, or is it because they're in need of repair, or is it I'm aware of one person sleeping rough in my ward because their property in another area of Bristol is no longer suitable for them. So I'm really interested in all of those things, really.
Would you like to answer that?
I'll pass that to the service who know the details more.
So, thank you, Chair. So, in terms of why properties are vacant, there's often a number of reasons for them. So, sometimes they're vacant just because it's a standard void. A tenant's moved out, we've got to do works to it, and then we re-let it. Other times, it's vacant because it's a void, but there are major works that need to be done to it before we can re-let it and get it back to lettable standard. Other times they can be major capital work, so it stands empty for much longer whilst we're going through planning and various things. So there are a number of reasons why a property will be showing as vacant. But of course, the key for us is using our vacant properties as quickly as we can to bring them back to life, because a void unit, one, costs the organisation, but two, is a home for somebody that we can be letting. So.
Thank you. And I think this. Sorry. Yes.
So, sorry, Chair. I don't actually have the number myself. Have you got the number in the report?
Do you have the number?
Sorry, it's not in this metric, but we have it in a different metric, so I'll see if I can look that up in a moment.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think this, this issue of void council properties and relets has been a real challenge for this council for a very long time. And I would just like to highlight that this report presents some good news in that we do have now improving relet times and reduced numbers of empty council homes. So I think that's a testament to the hard work of our tenancy teams and our wider asset management. So I'm going to go to Councillor Clark next.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be on a bit of a positive note, and it's also responding to something that Councillor Bales has said. Yesterday I did a visit to Sandy Park Depot, which is in my ward, and I'm also on HR, so I was sort of covering off a few things there, and it was really, really informative, and I thank all the staff for their time they gave up yesterday to take us round the depot. But one of the issues that we did talk about was voids, and one of the things that came out of that conversation for myself is actually having an in-house team, and the carpentry workshop is absolutely fabulous, which I've been to previously. Having that in-house team means that we can be responsive if we have to go out to the market for all of our repairs, and so we are able to, I'm not saying that we are able to move our stock forward as quickly as we'd like, because we can never do that, but we have to acknowledge that there frequently is work to be done. So having that in-house or those in-house resources does make it easier, but it's never going to be quick enough. We know that. There's always going to be houses that are sitting there empty for an unfathomable reason. But I just wanted to be a bit positive actually today, because this has been, on balance, quite a negative meeting so far. So let's be positive. It may not last, but thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Councillor Peat next.
I'm not 100% this is the most appropriate time to ask, but I just wanted to know when the private rented strategy will come to the committee.
So yeah, I mean it's not wholly relevant to this item, but
no,
I think,
just to know.
we can have a check on the forward plan, and we can get a sense of when that's going to come. It's I believe likely to be in the autumn. I don't have the exact.
Wasn't it going to come back in February? I'm sure, because it was following the rent commission, wasn't it? So wasn't it going to be in February? So it's strange that it's coming in autumn.
Let's pick that up outside this meeting, shall we?
Cheers.
Thank you. And I've got Councillor Eddy and then Councillor Thomas.
As has become customary, Chairman, you stole my thunder. I was good for Nick, thank you for this. I remember I particularly asked questions at PCCB about the voids, and that there are significant, I know Mark's been leading on that, measures we're taking which have already reduced the period and hopefully will further, but it's not a recent issue. I do recall 20 years ago when I was cabinet member for housing, the issue, we were very concerned about the voids there, so it's not a 5-minute wonder. The director may recall in her previous incarnation, I did write to her about a property in Bedminster Down, which for admittedly complicated reasons had, we believed, not been properly actually tenanted for over half a decade or so. So there are, as I accept, complicated issues, but we need to actually identify those and actually seek to resolve the matter.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I mean, I think this feels like a really good platform for the next stage of evolution of the dashboard. I also like the fact that you've got the number of homes delivered, which is not within the remit of this committee particularly. I mean, it's not within the remit of the directorate, but actually it's good to see that kind of cross-department working so that we've got a holistic picture of what we need to have a picture of. I think in terms of digestibility, I think bullet points rather than paragraphs, and perhaps no more than 3-4 bullet points in those management notes, and that would make it much easier to read and digest. I also think that really in terms of them being kind of useful KPIs and focusing activity and delivery, getting them onto one sheet of A4 would be good, but that's kind of like a nice to have. And if we were kind of slightly thinning down the number of KPIs that we've got, actually there are graphs for some of those things that it would be helpful to have over time, you know, so seeing some of those trends, so trends in affordable housing delivery, trends in homes on an annual basis, so that we can see, you know, the direction that things are going in. I know there's quite a lot in there in the body of the paragraphs around what the trends are actually like, but having that sort of easy at a view visual graph analysis would be really helpful. But that's doesn't need to be done immediately, but certainly in the longer term, having that would increase accessibility and usefulness of what is already very useful information. Thank you.
Yeah, Nick.
Thank you very much. Just come back on 2 points. One, just for information, there is a trend option within the dashboard, and it's a bar chart rather than a line chart, but it does, for all the metrics, one can see that. But yeah, we could, yeah, as you said, for the ones that have been highlighted, we could look at that. And yeah, through other discussions, I'm aware actually for housing, it's probably likely that there will be a lot more metrics in future, because there's a lot more that need to be raised through the regulator type areas. So it will be more, and then we'll be needing to look at how we identify the ones to really focus on in the meetings. And just coming back briefly to Councillor Bale's point, at the end of Q3 it was 314 with the number of empty homes, which is empty properties, and that's been going down for the last 18 months since a peak of around 400 18 months ago.
Thank you. Councillor Shabalala.
Thank you. It's quite a huge expense on council tax for that batch of homes. That's not my question, though. I think, as you said, Chair, there's a lot of positive stories out here. And one that really draws my attention is the number of households moved into settled accommodation. That's a huge one. That's really changing lives. From temporary accommodation to settled, what that means to morale, what that means to job prospects, what that means to those families is a magnificent story. As someone who's been through that situation, I know what that means. And I think sometimes we miss the dial with, you know, all the negative comments that comes with the housing conversation. There's also the positive stories. I'd like to see some of these positive stories, you know. I'd like to see some of those comms that actually match these matrix so that we can tell that public story, you know. So how does housing think of, you know, really having resources to tell the positive stories of the impacts that we are making to people's lives, good and bad, either way, but we need to be able to put that narrative out. And I'd really kind of eagerly ensure that we have a budget that's set aside to really tell positive stories, because people aren't going to read this matrix to find that story. And the people that have moved into those homes are not necessarily going to put themselves out on social media to tell those stories. And I think we're missing on that down. My question, though, is more focused on what is the logic or the reasoning or the policy that means that we need to follow a program plan of delivery that has so much more spillage of projects and budgeting versus stopping it. We've continued on previous kind of projects, and only now with the 2025-2026 financial forecast, we then get to move on, or with the updated version of the corporate strategy. Does the process always need to be that, or do you have the authority to just stop things so that you reduce expenditure immediately when you see that this could go on much longer than it needs to and it's not positive?
I think that the latter point is probably more, it's a more general point about how the council functions. And obviously we're led by the councillors, and the corporate strategy process is the process that then outlines what the overarching direction of the council will be. In terms of the details, though, the services absolutely will and do make the operational decisions as needed.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further hands. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, great. Before we move on from this, I think one more positive story that I'd like to highlight is the number of affordable homes starts on site. which has increased dramatically since the same quarter last year. And every one of those starts on site should lead to a new affordable home for somebody in the next few years. So that's again something that we should be celebrating, I think. There are many challenges in the delivery of affordable homes, but this is something that we're committed to doing what we can to ensure that Bristol has that supply, and that's evidenced by the Homes for Bristol interim affordable homes delivery plan, which we approved in this committee recently and has now been published on the website. I'm now, for the clarity of the committee, going to read the recommendations in the report, which is that the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee notes performance against the business plan relevant to this committee, including the issues raised and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by relevant services. Thank you. Agenda item 9 is the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme and Compliance Update. This report is to note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary, to note and comment on the Landlord Compliance Programme Combined Backlog and Business as Usual Performance Report. So this is a change to the format of previous reports, but you will have seen that in the papers. To note the update on the Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, and to note and comment on the residents' voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel. And finally, to note and comment on the update from the latest regulatory review meeting with the Regulator of Social Housing, which I and the Chief Executive attended. This is a non-key decision. I'm now going to invite Richard James, who is Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Lead, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to talk the whole paper, but I will give a very quick summary of the different sections and then open up for questions, if that's okay. As Councillor Parsons said, the report an update covers the improvement plan summary. There's a summary in the cover paper, but also in Appendix A1. What that shows is the steady progress on the completion of tasks, and it also shows that overdue and at risk of delay tasks are remaining broadly the same. The current programme is in amber at the moment. That is mainly due to challenges with damper mould and bringing those numbers down. There's a lot of work in this area, and it's a big focus for the programme board, and we'll be bringing an update on our improvement plans to the next committee. Also, fire safety. There again, there's a focus for the programme board. You will see at the next committee that there is a downward trajectory of actions, but they didn't come into force for this pack, but you will see that in future. Also, a focus on asset data and especially health and safety data coming out of the back of stock condition surveys. Similar themes. Covered the performance report, so there's a summary in the cover report, but also Appendix A2. Good progress on electrical safety, historic response repairs, gas safety, and lift safety. Again, the same areas of challenge are what I've previously mentioned. The report also covers an update for the progress with the Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, which we're planning to bring to the May committee for consideration and approval. We also give a summary of the residents' voice and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel and the Spring Housing Forums that are brought into the report. And finally, there's an update on engagement with the Regulator of Social Housing in the report. So I'll just open out for any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Peat.
So, to begin with, what specific compliance areas are most at risk, and how long will it take to address them?
Yeah, the areas that are the biggest risk and the biggest focus for the programme board are around damp and mould and fire safety. Regarding timescales, we will be able to bring some more detail to the next committee. That recently went to the programme board for consideration, and detailed delivery plans are being progressed, and improvement options are being considered. So I can't give you exact dates for those now, but we certainly will be bringing more detail to the next committee on those areas. But I would like to assure the committee that they very much are an area of focus for the service.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, if stock is not subject to the necessary repairs, that means that homes are not being rented out. Do we have any data on how the delayed repairs may be contributing to homelessness?
Would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. So I think we need to decouple repairs. So this isn't about these homes, the homes that are form part of the Housing Consumer Standard Programme, are homes that residents are living in. So they're tenanted. So they're not necessarily void properties, which is very separate to standard repairs and day-to-day repairs activity.
Obviously, with my colleague, she's mentioned that she's got a resident who's rough sleeping because they are unable to live in their property because it's not fit for human habitation. So obviously there is, whilst these homes might be occupied technically, due to the state of disrepair, it might also be contributing to homelessness.
So I do think it's quite difficult to comment, and I can't comment on an individual case. There'll be a number of reasons perhaps that relate to why that individual isn't occupying their home as the principal home. It would be unusual to have a situation where we have a home in such poor condition that someone felt unable to live in that and occupy that home. And where that is the case, we would have a responsibility as landlord,
of course,
to rehome them. So we wouldn't see them living homeless on the street. So I'm sure there are circumstances relating to that individual case that make it difficult for us to comment, and difficult for Councillor Bells to comment on with detail, but more than happy to look into that individual case as necessary.
Okay, and then just quickly, some questions about the IT transformation going on. I appreciate that you have said that the new IT system absolutely will be ready in time. However, failing to plan is planning for failure. So in the event that it is not ready, what is the contingency? Will employees be forced to use the unfinished system, or will we be expecting the council to shell out more money?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of in the event failing to plan, I absolutely accept that comment. We have a deadline date. So we have a red line date that we must deliver by. And I think for those of us that have an understanding of the basics of IT, sometimes that means that you get an IT system that's what we call our minimal viable product. We will have to go live with a minimal viable product by the deadline date, and that may mean that we don't get the full product that we need, but we will have a product that we go live by because we have a deadline date. It's our intention and the work of the team and the team that are working on this is to deliver over and above the minimal viable product.
So essentially, like, it'll be a beta version or an alpha version of the product.
Because we have to have a product by a deadline.
Will that have security risks at all if it's not finished?
So, no, so I think I'm not an IT expert. I would say the basic product isn't about security risk, it's about its capability to provide us with all of the data in the way that we want it.
And I'm going to move us on to our next question. If there's more time, we'll come back to you, Zoe. Councillor Eddy, you had a hand up.
Richard, again, thank you for a very typically comprehensive report. I've been always reassured with this programme that it's very much risk-led, and that determines actually the timeline, etc., of the various project stands. Now, looking at the damp and mould position, obviously I understand that's an area where you've highlighted we have to put in more attention, and it is complex, including, for example, staffing the remediations. Now, I appreciate, in my view, one could never underestimate the intellect of the average elected member, but can I just probe this on the page about damp mould? Offers a state it's not possible to actually fully report the level of risk. So could you just explain why that's the case here?
Yeah, I can start off. I might hand over to my colleague in a minute, but I'll start. Yes, it's how we've been recording damp and mould cases, not that come through stock condition survey, but are reported directly by residents. So residents fill out a form which gives some details on damp and mould, and one of the questions is related to the severity of the damp and mould. So the residents stating what that severity is. And so we're currently assessing the priority of those based on that. But what we need to do is have a more proactive inspection regime, and we are recruiting additional surveyors to be able to inspect those properties so we can have complete surety on the severity of those actions. And at the moment, there are resource challenges to inspect all of those properties within a really proactive timescale. Was there anything you want to press the button?
Thank you. First meeting, so forgive me. We're also working with colleagues in social services and housing management to look at the occupation risk as well as the risk to the structure, because obviously we are getting ready for the full implementation of AWAB's law in October, and that requires you to understand things like asthma, other respiratory illnesses, children of a certain age. So it's a work in progress, but it's something that's very high priority.
Thank you.
I thank officers for those explanations, and briefly just comment with regard to the summary of the recent meeting with the social housing regulator. I understand the director had to intervene or at least reassure them on several issues, but I think the fact we clearly had a very open and informative, positive relationship has only been good to the good, actually. So I'm hopeful that will continue.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on this thing about the damp and mould. I know it's a massive issue, but there's also a role for education. So obviously we need to make sure that our properties are in a good state with ventilation, insulation, etc. But are we also doing a programme of education about don't dry your socks on the radiator, that kind of thing, and just making sure that people are aware that there are things that residents can do to ensure that their properties are working as comfortable as possible? Thank you.
Yes, so all properties which we have registered as having reported as having a damp and mould issue, we are writing out to, and we're giving them access to advice to support that, and we're also signposting residents to different places to get help and support, both from us but also from other means. So we are taking a much more proactive approach than we have in the past.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just felt it was important to add, the basics of things like heat poverty and the impact that has. So when we're thinking about support, it's incredibly holistic, because there'll be a number of reasons. Sometimes it'll be overcrowding. There'll be a number of factors that feed into that. And I think to be proactive, we have to respond to all of those activities. So just wanted to assure councillors of that approach.
Thanks. Councillor Bales.
You mentioned stock condition surveys, and I don't normally sit on this committee, but I seem to be here quite a lot. So we've talked about it before, and I know it was initiated a long time ago under the previous administration, and I think one of the previous meetings that I sat on, I think you said, or whoever it was, said only about 3% of the total amount had been carried out then. So is there an update on how many since then? Is it more than 3%?
It's certainly more than 3%, yes. So I'm just having a look at my statistics here just to give you an idea, but off the top of my head, we had planned this year to complete 8,000 stock condition surveys. As of the end of February, I think we were around 5,500 of that. So 8,000 would have given us 30%. We've done about 5.5. So I can't do the maths off the top of my head, but it's significantly above 3%. We're not sure whether we will achieve the 8,000 this financial year, but we won't be a million miles away. And what we're going to do is make sure that we pick those properties up in next year's programme. So by March 2026, we plan to get to 70% of homes with a stock condition survey. That's 18,500, and that's still our plan. So there's good progress. There was some delay earlier in the year because there were some concerns around the quality of the surveys being carried out, but we've resolved that, and we made a decision that it was really important to get high quality inspections, and the programme is back on track now.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. First question is on the damp and mould, and it's kind of linked into what Councillor Clark said. Is there a sort of root cause analysis of the damp and mould issues in terms of, I can imagine some damp and mould issues are related to actually the building's in an awful state and you can't do anything about it until the bigger building is fixed, and some might be down to individual flats from behavioural issues. So in terms of that shape, the overview, that would be helpful to understand that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Claire Gibb to respond to that.
We are starting to look at the cause rather than the symptoms. To date, we have cases quite significant across the whole type of our archetypes, which are pointing to the age of the buildings and the thermal capacity. So thermal capacity and cold bridging is an issue. We also have damp and mould cases that are actually relatively easy to sort out the cause. So we're realigning our resources to tackle the problem, not the symptoms. And finally, I'd like to assure you that we've linked it into the grant award we got for green energy and retrofitting for the future and insulation grants to get properties above EPC C, so that we have a much more holistic approach, that where we have a damp and mould issue, we can work closely with the family regarding risk, and we can also look at other streams of money to get the property to be more acceptable and meet the standards.
Thank you. So that was
you had a second question.
That was the first. Yeah, that was the first question. It talks in the overview about the challenging area being lack of robust data management and ownership protocols. I'm surprised that we are instructing Savills on that when we've got a kind of major IT development programme which will have obviously very strong issues around robust data management and ownership. Could you explain a bit more why Savills are in there rather than it being integrated into the IT project, please?
That's fine. Yeah, I'll start. You're right, it has strong links with the IT system, but the IT system will look at the data from very much a data perspective. So is there data in certain fields, in the fields it should be, and what fields it's in at the moment and what fields it needs to go to in the new fields, in the new system. So it's very much looking at, basically, is there something there? Savills are doing something different. The risk with that is that you end up moving poor quality data across, and the IT system implementation won't necessarily prevent that. That's why it's important to be using Savills, who have got much more detailed knowledge on compliance and asset management perspectives. So they're helping us look at our asset management systems, looking across systems to see any irregularities between the different systems, and also are we holding the data at the right level to be able to report accurately off it. So they're using much more of their technical and compliance, landlord compliance and asset management expertise, and they'll do that alongside the NEC implementation, who are very looking at it from very much a pure data perspective.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's a helpful answer for now. It doesn't really allay my concerns that there isn't a integrated design and ownership approach around the IT. Could I come on to just the work streams as a final thing? It talks about focus for the next period as seeing slide 8, issue flag reports commentary, but I couldn't, within the pack, see what that was referring to. And I mean, I don't necessarily need to see it now because the flavour of it is clear enough. But I was particularly interested that on the fire safety side, there's obviously a huge project around tall buildings and compliance with the Building Safety Registrar. I'm just wondering what the progress is on that.
Yeah, okay. I'll answer the first part and then I'll hand over to Claire about the Building Safety Regulator. So the reference to the issue flag reports is around the areas that the programme board calls in to examine more details. So the issue flag reports that went to the March programme board were related to damp and mould and fire. And you will see the results of what came out of that at the next committee. So it's just a detailed report to look at all the issues, look at the blockages, and look at the options to improve delivery. And you won't see the issue flag report, but you will see the outcome of those decisions that were made at the next committee.
Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you, Chair. In addition, fire safety is height and tenure blind. So we are using the legislative standards for high-rise and the regulator of social housing and the fire safety standards for mid-rise, and we are applying them across our stock. That approach has been endorsed by Avon Fire and Rescue Service, and they are doing a series of audits which we are tackling in risk order, i.e. the biggest number and the highest rise buildings first, but the audits will come through so that we have a comprehensive fire safety strategy so that we can provide assurance that we have done everything we can as a landlord to keep our residents safe.
Okay. Just final follow-up to that.
Right. Yeah.
And do we have building safety case reports in place for the over 18-metre buildings?
We are working to the original Building Safety Regulator published programme dealing with the highest risk buildings first, and we are on programme to have that completed by June this year. We are waiting to be invited to apply to the regulator for our first building safety certificate. And in the meantime, I've asked for the building safety cases to be reviewed so that I have confidence that when we are invited to apply for a certificate, we have maximised our chance of success.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time, I think, for one more question. And Councillor Peat, I think you had a further question earlier on. Are you okay? We'll go to Councillor Stone then.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, can you just quickly just run through the repairs table, because I'm a bit confused how we've lost about 12,000 repairs in the conversation in it on page 68. And why is there 12,175 kind of like open cases, which you've gone through a data review and we seem to have lost a lot of those? And just can you kind of like corroborate that data for me, please?
Yeah, so you're referring to Appendix A1? There we are. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's what I thought. Fine. Yeah, so the part of the programme was to carry out a detailed data review. What we knew at the time, when we did the self-referral and the regulatory judgment, is that a lot of the repairs that we were showing as overdue weren't actually overdue. They'd been completed, and they're still on the system because we didn't have strong controls to close jobs down and to do the housekeeping. So what you'll see from the blue bar that's reducing, a lot of those repairs are where we have carried out that data review, and we've phoned residents. We've checked whether repairs are still open. In the vast majority of cases, the very historic cases, they haven't been opened. They have been completed, and we have closed those jobs down, and that's the majority that's led to that reduction. Where we have identified that repairs are still open, we have prioritised them for completion. And that will be one of the reasons that you see the orange bar growing, because we've been concentrating a lot on the older jobs. But the largest the biggest reason for the reduction in the blue bar is because we've improved our housekeeping.
One follow-up, yeah.
Yeah, I understood. I kind of understood that was what was going on. So you've improved your housekeeping. How is it that we still can't get hold like 205 residents, and you're sending letters and you're calling them? And surely our estates team or our housing officers would know numbers and telephones. Is that another thing we have to obviously tidy up our data? But that's concerned, Richard. Yeah.
Would you like to respond to that, Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll try and respond to that. So I think the reality is, if you've reported a repair and that repair has been done, and we are phoning you about a repair, sometimes with the best will, I think sometimes the resident just doesn't respond, and we can't close it until we get a response. So we write and we phone and we write and we phone. But, it's human nature. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we, where we've had someone chasing us for something, but it's been done. So you mean to inform the landlord, and I think that's part of the problem, that we're not getting a response and we can't close the cases until we absolutely know that they've been done. Okay. So it isn't a matter of data not being there. I think it's a matter of us being able to obtain a response from the resident.
Okay. Got Councillor Bales, and then I'm going to try and move us on. So I think, Al, you've got a question. So if you can keep your questions brief, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's just a comment really. With the phone calls, I know when the council rings our mobile phones, it comes up with withheld or private numbers, and I'm guilty of that. I will not answer them because you don't know who it is. So is there a way of texting the tenant first to say, we're going to call you at such and such a time, or...
I'm going to ask Mark Kemp to respond to that.
Hi, yes, we said exactly the same thing to our repairs service, and it's something that they've changed because, as you quite rightly say, if you get a private withheld number, you're not going to answer it. So, yeah, that's something that we fed back.
Thank you. Councillor Al-Maghrabi.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask, isn't there a way where, like, if they haven't responded in, say, 5 months or 6 months, can't that case be just forced closed? Is that not a feasible thing? Thank you.
Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I think you have a very good point. We just need to make sure that we've made every effort and we can document that. So it's really important. But those will be some of the longer term decisions that we need to make. And what will happen is there'll be a recommendation that will come to the programme board, and the programme board will sign off that approach. So it isn't something I'll be comfortable with officers just making a decision to do without us having, one, the data to prove that we had made every attempt, and two, that the decision signed off by the board. But absolutely, that is something we will be doing in time.
Thank you. I'd like to thank members for your careful scrutiny of this absolutely vital programme. And I'm going to read out for the clarity of the committee the recommendations of the report, which is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes and comments on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary, notes and comments on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Landlord Compliance Programme Combined Backlog and Business as Usual Performance Report, note the update on the Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, note and comment on the residents' voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, and note and comment on the update from the latest regulatory review meeting with the Regulator of Social Housing. Thank you. Agenda item 10 is on the Resident Engagement Task and Finish Group. This report is to establish a member task and finish group to review resident engagement across housing and landlord services and its associated terms of reference. Now, this is a non-key decision, but this is the decision that we will be taking to establish a task group that we discussed at our work programme setting before Christmas, and I think there was general agreement then that we needed to do something along these lines. I'm going to, in a minute, I'm going to invite Mark Kemp to introduce the report, but I could see I got a hand from Councillor Clark.
I wanted to make some comments. I wanted to get in early, but I'll wait for Mark to speak, and then I'll come back if that's okay.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to ask Mark Kemp, who's Interim Head of Housing Management and Estates, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the Chair has set out, at the Committee Work Programme Setting Workshop in December the 3rd, 2024, the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee agreed to establish a task and finish group to provide an overview of resident engagement within housing and landlord services. Resident engagement aims to improve service delivery, enhance community cohesion, and ensure residents' voices are heard in decision-making, enhance community cohesion, ensure residents' voices are heard in decision-making processes. Various methods are used to engage with Bristol City Council residents currently, including service user groups, forums, panels, surveys, and day-to-day service delivery. However, Bristol City Council faces similar challenges to those of other social housing landlords, such as limited resources, varying levels of resident interest, and the need to engage a wider representation of residents to meet the needs of our diverse communities. Integrating resident feedback into housing delivery and ensuring continuous monitoring and evaluation of engagement is essential. The Social Housing Regulation Act mandates that social housing providers engage with residents to ensure they have a say in the management and maintenance of their homes, and this work will tie in with the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme. I'm happy to take some questions.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So just for the clarity of members of this committee as well, so what happens with task and finish groups is that things like the membership, the frequency of meeting, the duration that they meet for are all determined outside of this meeting, and there'll be an opportunity for all parties to get involved in those decisions. And the scope of the terms of reference for this group has been deliberately drawn pretty widely so that the members of that group actually have the opportunity to direct, determine what areas they want to focus on and how they want to go about their business. So with that in mind, I'm going to go first to Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. Task and finish groups, no problems at all. but they need to be tight, and their terms of reference need to be really tight, because I know that the task and finish group we've got on the on the working group for the committee system is probably never going to end. I don't know if anybody here is sitting on it, but it just feels like it's going to go on forever and ever and ever, and that's really bad. And I just think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we haven't got unlimited time, because at the moment we seem to be having an awful lot of briefings with a lot of these committees, and task and finish groups are very, very time hungry. And if we need to be sustainable, this is our first year of the committee system. That's fine, and it's a learning experience. But if we want members to remain engaged and think that these specific tasks are relevant, that we need to make sure it's tight, and it needs to be very time limited. 6 or 8 meetings maximum, in, out, and get the job done, because you'll lose enthusiasm. You will definitely lose enthusiasm. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And as I said, so the scope and the frequency of meetings will be for the members of that group to determine. But personally, I would agree with you. I would hope that this group is able to meet fairly frequently over the sort of spring and summer, and be in a position to report back to this committee by the autumn.
My comment, which I know I've made before, I just want to reiterate that it's not going to start until the new municipal year. Yes. There's absolutely no way that we can be starting it now, because there's going to possibly could be a change of personnel on this side. So there's no point in starting it until we get into the next municipal year.
Absolutely.
Please.
Councillor Al-Maghrabi. No? Councillor Bales.
I wanted to ask about the Housing Management Board, because it seems to have disappeared, and that was one way that residents and tenants could engage, because I think some of us, I think Richard and... Did you sit on the Housing Management Board? Probably. And yeah, and because we used to have them at City Hall, and members of the public could come along like any other council meeting and contribute to those meetings. Then they went online, and it was just us and whoever was invited to those meetings, so members of the public couldn't engage. And we still have the housing forums, and I'm not sure how much engagement you get there, because some residents like them in one place, and I know there's been some work on moving them around, because I know in my ward particularly, if we always have them in Hartcliffe, everybody from Withywood says, you never do anything in this area. Mm-hmm. So there was one held recently in Withywood, but it was in a meeting place that isn't used that often, and people don't necessarily know it's there. But yeah, I'm really worried about the Housing Management Board, because it just disappeared.
Yeah, so last year we took the decision to pause and review the operations of the Housing Management Board, really because what we know that we need to do is to create ways of engaging with residents that fulfil our responsibilities now under the new regulations that we're subject to, and that are really sort of that are kind of fit for our responsibilities as a landlord, in a way that's modern, that provides the opportunity for residents to be supported and engaged, that provides opportunity for expert input as well, and that addresses the diverse needs of all of our communities. And so we're going to be bringing some proposals to the next meeting of this committee about what that might look like. And I would say, from my point of view, that more broadly, I would expect the Task and Finish group to look at issues such as engagement within neighbourhoods, because that's something that's really a sort of crucial responsibility of ours under the new regulations, and because we know that our communities across the city are very, very diverse and have diverse needs and want to engage in different ways. Yeah, would you like to come back?
Obviously, we've got rid of the rent offices, and these forums and these meetings and things they were places where you could engage with like things like repairs, and like you could report repairs there. You could talk directly to an officer, and if they're held in communities, that's, you know, people might not necessarily want to come all the way up to City Hall to report a repair. They don't necessarily want to go to Temple Street, and it's, you know, those smaller rent offices, they were really brilliant places for engagement. Like, you could go and pay your rent. Now if you pay it online, you've got a different rent account to your council tax account, and then if you want to report a repair, you have to go to a different website. Whereas in a rent office or a housing forum or management meeting, you could, you know, you could have inquiries about all of that all in one place. So it's just, you know, it's that face-to-face interaction. Even if when you're reporting a repair, in our local rent offices, you used to have a booklet. If you didn't know what the thing that you wanted repaired, you could point to a picture. And it's just, it seems like we need that face-to-face interaction with people.
I'm going to ask Mark Kemp to respond to that.
Hello. I think it's safe to say we're not going to be able to go back to that model for various reasons, including cost primarily. However, I think part of the Task and Finish group is about looking at that engagement and visibility and how we change our approach, because at the moment, I'm not confident we are out there as much as we should be. And we need to be looking at how we engage with residents, maybe via surgeries or walkabouts or whatever, to pick up those points that you're talking about. So I think this is a really great opportunity to look at the piece as a whole and come up and try some new solutions and just trial some new things, because the appetite is there. I just think it'd be good to have that push and support to try some new approaches and to learn from other approaches that we already have in other areas of the city which are working. So I totally understand what you're saying. I think we just need to move away from that previous model and look for something new. And also, with the there's been concern about the new IT system, which I understand, but that will also bring opportunities as well for how we can deliver some of that interaction digitally with residents. So that's another area that we will be able to look at in the future.
Thank you, Karen. I think, you know, as Mark said, these sorts of questions are exactly the sorts of things I would expect that Task and Finish group to be asking. I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy next.
Very briefly, I'd like to thank Councillor Clark for speaking for England, as I say, perhaps even broader. And that's not least because for my sins, I serve as Tory rep on the so-called committee of the committees. So I improvise for that. And secondly, after May, when we have a Tory Lord Mayor, my group will be in the same position as you've been in. So certainly I'm looking for very focused, time-limited and efficient Task and Finish groups. And I'm sure that would be the case here. I agree, as Mark's indicated, this is key as part of our commitment to the Consumer Standards Programme, and as you've highlighted it, Chairman, it's an essential feature, so fully in support.
Thank you. Councillor Shabalala next, and then Councillor Peake.
Thanks. Just for the sake of painting the picture on the importance of this, and I'm not using myself as the person making the numbers here, but I'd like your clarity on it. 62 high-rises, almost 28,000 social housing. That's a lot of residents. How many is that, roughly? How many residents do we have?
How many residents do we have?
Yeah.
Probably upwards of 30,000, I should think.
30,000.
27,000 properties.
Yeah.
And when we look at the high-rise response in terms of the reports, we have 230 engagements. So that's probably less than a percentage, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when talking about this Task and Finish group, it is a massive undertaking. You know, short or long, it is a massive undertaking. If we'd like the voices of our residents to be heard and for us here as officers, officers and councillors, to support that narrative in the tight budgets that we have. I think we need to also be ready to pull our sleeves up equally to support, residents to engage either in, redefining what that process is or reshaping what the future of that level of engagement is. 5 years I've been on, from a resident perspective, on the boards, from repairs to, what's the other ones that you have? Repairs and complaints and so forth. And I've never seen the level of diversity, and I've never seen any levels of changes within the people that attend online. I never attended the ones that were not online because it's due to COVID. So changes need to reflect our wider community. And the feedback that we get from those residents needs to reflect then how we then deliver services back. I'm looking forward to this. I think I'm really tired of seeing the lack of engagement in surveys because it doesn't really paint a good picture of what the resident voice is saying. And we need to increase that level of response so that we better understand what residents are saying, and we don't get, we didn't say this, you've done it to us, we don't believe in the survey, it's made up, you already made the decision, blah, blah, blah. I would ask all of us to really look at the Wigan deal. It is a promise between residents, and from that promise, what you find is that they've never raised the council tax for 5 years through a resident's promise. Now, that's everyone pulling their sleeves up, and I'd ask us, when we think about this task and finish group, to pull our sleeves up. Thank you for the report and for the suggestion. Really important.
Thank you, Sibs. Councillor Peat.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. So the first one is essentially, I think there are 2 things that are really important to come from this task and finish group. Firstly, is that on the committee or the group, there are some councillors or members who have experience living in council properties. I'm always adamant that the thing that separates more than anything, be that race, gender or sexuality, it's always going to be class, and we need to make sure that there are people who have experience living in council housing or experience having been homeless on this group. And secondly is that we need to make sure that one of the key focuses of the data that we're gathering is that we get experiences from people who with lived experience of being homeless as well. So are we going to make sure that this is a focus, and that not only do we have diversity in terms of the protected characteristics on the committee, but can we make sure that we also have representation of council tenants and people who have been homeless on it as well?
Thanks, Zoe. So, I mean, personally, I would agree with you. I think it's important that we have that diversity of representation on the group. Of course, as I said at the start, the actual composition of the group will be a matter for the political groups to decide outside of this meeting.
Great. And the second question is that there is a point to be made that one of the ways that the public can engage with us is through the public forum of this committee, and yet it does appear that sometimes we seem to treat members of the gallery with a certain amount of contempt whenever they challenge the chair, which is yourself, obviously. And why should, I wonder, why should the public trust the task and finish group to listen to their voices if we're not listening to them here and we're shutting them down when they ask questions?
Well, I mean, I think there are rules for how public forum works in committees. So members of the public are allowed to 2 supplementary questions under the rules that we have established in our constitution. So that's how it works.
To your discretion. There were 3 people in the gallery. They could have had 10 minutes each. As
you say, it is my discretion as chair. Yeah. And you know, as you will have seen, I allow people to have further questions when time allows, but it is up to me as chair. I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy next.
I'm aware this isn't a debate, but I would remind you respectfully members who were only elected last year that actually, since 2016, actually elected members and the public were routinely ignored, were shouted down. So I have to say, and I'm being honest here, in my view, the committee system has been an unmitigated success, and it's far more transparent and reasonable than what happened before.
Thank you very much. I've got a hand from Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I mean, I think very much recognising the need, but also echoing the concerns about good use of time and what happens between now and the next meeting, because I do think that there needs to be some more work in terms of reviewing resident engagement, and so that when this task and finish group kicks off, the task and the finish are much clearer. And what I would say there is, in terms of what I would like to see covered in terms of some kind of written report, what's going well about resident engagement at the moment, what's not going so well, and what has some of the learning been from recent experience. What is the, where do we want to get to in terms of resident engagement? And clearly one of those things is actually there's new legal guidance around resident engagement, so actually the legal compliance with what we need to do, and how does it fit with existing priorities. And one of the things I would say is we've got this crossover. I mean, Kerry gave the example of you have to go to one website for rent payment, another for complaints, and another for repairs. And actually, there is something about a sort of user-friendly, all in one place, and then people feel actually the council is responsive and acting on what my concerns are. So that is, that's not just about having meetings with people, it's about a whole integrated approach. And there may be something around a satisfaction survey in terms of actually talking to a range of people about how they feel about engagement from the council, and then seeing, because we'll be quite dominated by the people who've got, who feel most strongly about things, but that might not necessarily be giving us a kind of overall holistic picture of how people feel. And I would also say around engagement, what we're trying to do is create a culture where, as organisationally, we listen, we learn, and we act. And so it's not just are we engaging with our residents, but I know talking to some housing officers, they feel actually it's easier for a member of the public to get heard than it is for me working on this estate to get heard. So actually that sense that we've got overall a culture that listens, learns, and acts. There is a bigger piece, but as Joss said, you could go into this, and unless you've got a tightly defined remit, you could go on forever. So actually, just a bit more work up front before we kick anything off, I think would be a really good idea to get the best value out of it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I think I'm going to move us on. I did just want to say, though, that there is a lot of activity going on in the area of resident engagement, and of which this forms a part. So we're currently engaging on our resident engagement strategy, and as has been said, we're looking to find ways of setting up new kinds of forums for residents to get involved. This is very much the start of a process. We think, for us as members to get involved in what that work looks like, and there will be a lot of discretion for the chair and the members of that group to follow where they think they can most add value, and in particular, of course, as representatives of diverse communities across Bristol, I think as the councillors on that group will have the opportunity to sort of make sure that what we do works for as many people as possible in our city. So, for the clarity of the committee, I'd like to read the recommendations of the report. and there's one recommendation, that is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report and further details supplied in the appendix and approves the recommended approach. Can I ask for an indication that we are? Absolutely, and that will be part of the process of setting up the task and finish group. Yes, it will be minuted as planned. Thank you. So, are we happy to approve that? Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry. Moving on to agenda item 11, which is the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme quarterly update. This report is to provide an update on the progress of the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme. It's a non-key decision, but it's worth noting that this report very much provides the context for the following report, which is agenda item 12, and that's the full business case and a key decision that the committee will be asked to consider and vote on. So now I'm going to invite Paul Sylvester, who's Head of Housing Options, to introduce and outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is the first of two reports on the Tackling Homelessness Programme. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on the progress of the programme, and this is the third quarterly update which I've brought to this committee, and by now you'll be very familiar with the work of the programme, so I will keep this introduction short. The format of the report is similar to previous updates, where we are providing a progress update against each project, an update on programme costs, an update on the reduction in overspend on temporary accommodation delivered by each project, and a summary of risks to the programme objectives and mitigations. A few examples of progress since the last quarterly update include lots of positive news around acquiring properties for temporary accommodation. So through the housing revenue account, we have purchased 21 homes to date out of 25. Apologies, it says 13 in the report, but things move on. And Strategy and Resources Committee gave approval to borrow £33 million to purchase 75 homes in 25-26 to use as TA. So the council really behind the initiatives to grow the right type of TA and the right being managed by organisations. So we also secured approval at the last Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to increase access to the private rented sector for our clients, building on our success in working in a challenging market. And we are making good progress with implementing the housing options redesign, investing in additional resources to increase our prevention of homelessness and supporting clients to move on from temporary accommodation. So in summary, Chair, we are pleased with the progress we are making. Everyone involved in the programme is working effectively together, and the programme is delivering, and we have exceeded our target cost reduction for 24-25. So I'll move over to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I just wanted to remind the committee as well that, as I said, we're going to be discussing the Tackling Homelessness Programme further in our next agenda item. So I'm going to allow an opportunity for questions and comments now, but I think I'll keep it quite brief, and so that we can have more debate and discussion on the next item. And in particular for this one, I think it might be an idea if we try and limit ourselves to clarifications of the current report. Great, thank you very much. So Councillor Peat first.
My questions relate to the incentives that we're going to provide to landlords. I don't think it's a bad idea or anything, so don't worry, I'm not attacking. I just don't know what the incentives are. There doesn't seem to be anything in the report that outlines how we're going to incentivise landlords, but it's been thrown around for a couple of months now. Do we have any ideas of what those are and what metrics we're going to use?
Yes, of course. So broadly speaking, what we're wanting to do with the private rented sector is to house people in properties that are rented out at the local housing allowance, so to make it affordable for our clients. So a lot of the incentives involve paying the landlord direct to top up the rent so that they then let the properties out at an affordable rent to clients. We also do many things in terms of free inventories. You know, we deal with sort of tenant issues, the sorts of things that lettings agents do, but we do for free as part of the package.
And do we have data of where this has been successful in other places within the country?
We will do, yeah. I mean, it's bread and butter for most local authorities who work in high demand areas, yeah.
That was pretty much all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Councillor Stone, next.
I just wanted to ask whether or not the increase in supply of temporary accommodation, which is great, thank you very much for that, Paul, are these options for van dwellers to help them move off the curbside? Are we opening up these temporary accommodations to that? Are we providing that type of assistance?
Okay. So temporary accommodation is for anybody where we've accepted a homeless duty, and people living in vans can approach the local authority for support in the same way that anybody else who's homeless.
And yeah, you can have a follow-up.
Yeah, I thought that would be the answer. It was rhetorical. I was wondering how much of that support is actually happening to help people off the curbside into temporary accommodation? Or is it up to the people who are living in temporary in van dwellers to come to you, or are we actually part of like Tom Gilman's?
I think that's that's something maybe that Tom might want to come in on in terms of the work that his team does in terms of liaising with people.
Yeah, I was going to say we as part of obviously the work that Paul and his team are doing, St Mungo's as part of their commission work are visiting vehicle dwellers and trying to encourage them where they want to move into and apply for affordable housing if that's available and they meet the criteria. Obviously they have to go through, as all residents and applications do, the Homes Choice Bristol process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Al Maghrabi.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask, how much are we hoping to save with this new approach compared to the last approach?
Okay, yep, so that's a good question. I mean, what I will say is, the savings have been built into the budget setting for 25-26, and we're looking at making gross savings of 8 million this year.
Wow.
Yeah, nice. Gross savings. But I do want to let the committee know that we're at year end at the moment for 24-25, but it looks like for the first time in many years our spend on TA was less last year than the year before. Nice. So there are reasons to be hopeful. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Eddy.
Councillor Stone has already posed my question largely, but one brief point. To my cynical mind, I've often said Bristol City Council devises plenty of superb strategies and plans, but too many sit on dusty shelves or actually now in the cyberface place. But that's all credit, Paul. I'm delighted to see the various initiatives this committee has endorsed are going ahead and being implemented.
Councillor Bales.
Speaking about the access to private rented sector, when you fill out your home choice application, you've got that form. That's quite long and in-depth, and it asks you lots and lots of questions. And then you have to fill out the housing options form, which also asks you some similar or the same questions as the other form. But I'm finding that people are reluctant to tick the box for private rented sector because perhaps they're already living in a private rent and the rent's gone up and they're going to be evicted, or whatever is going on for them. They're due to become homeless, but they don't want to go back into private housing. And I'm wondering if it's because the information that's available about the scheme you do with the private rented sector is very, very limited. So when I say, like, that might be a good option for you, it's difficult for me to explain because I don't know much about it. And when you're sat there with them filling out that form, it's very, very, very limited.
No, I agree that it has been quite limited, the information that's out there, but the Chair talked earlier about this online advice that we've launched recently this week with Advice Aid, so people can access it through the council website. There's lots and lots of information on there, particularly around the private rented sector. So have a look at that, see if you think it's any better, and then let me know. Yeah.
Councillor Clark.
On the issue of private rented, can I just ask briefly, are we renting from large companies, or is it just individual one-by-one properties?
Yeah, it's a real mix. So we do have people that have 1 or 2 properties, and maybe our largest landlord has 20 or 30.
Oh, relatively small then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks everybody. Councillor Peat.
Just back to the private rented sector strategy, is it possible we can bring it to committee sooner than autumn?
So the sort of the rhythm and the timescales for presenting papers to this committee depends to a very large extent on the work that needs to go in to bring them to us. They need to go through decision pathways, and in the case of something like this strategy, it will need to go needs to go through consultation and engagement. So
I know it was definitely meant to come like March, February time. Is there a reason why that perhaps it's had to be reconsulted, or something that's being delayed or something?
There was never a March date for this paper, so I think let's move on if we can, because I think we are going to discuss it at a later date. Thank you. So for the clarity of the committee, I'm going to ask. Oh, sorry, I apologise, Jerome, I didn't see. Councillor Thomas then.
Yeah, just very briefly. Yeah, I mean, it looks like really good work from you and your team, and it seems to be on plan. Fantastic. I think just in terms of, I'm not sure whether it's the right place, but while the van dwelling issue remains such a problem, I think that should be coming to there should be an update to each of this committee so that we know where we are on progress. So I'd make that request. I don't know if it's the right place.
Thank you.
Sorry, only if there's anything to say.
Yeah.
Because if we're just repeating what we've said the month before, then I think that's...
I think if there's nothing to say and urgent action required, I think that in itself is helpful to see as well. Urgent action is required, so it's as important to see if there's been no progress as if there has been some progress, I'm afraid.
Okay, let's move on. So the recommendations for this paper are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes that the report states that the Tackling Homelessness Programme's financial objectives include £4,293,000 of recurring subsidy loss reduction in 2024-25, which will be delivered, and a further £8,205,606 of recurring savings in 25-26. The programme is working on additional initiatives that will result in further subsidy loss reduction. The amount of those will to be confirmed. That the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes, the report states that as per rebaselining at CLB on the 12th of November 2024, the Tackling Homelessness Programme budget is £2,748,165 for 24-25, plus contingency held centrally. That the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes that as per rebaselining at CLB on the 12th of November 24, no revenue funding has yet been approved for 25-26, but the programme will request to spend £1,925,947 plus contingency for 25-26 in a separate paper presenting the programme's full business case, which we now move on to. So, agenda item 12 is the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme full business case. So this report is to seek approval to spend the transformation funding for the delivery of the Tackling Homelessness Programme in 25-26, pending approval of the wider transformation fund at Strategy and Resources Committee in May of 25. This is a key decision. It involves a spend of over £500,000 and it affects 2 or more wards. I'm going to ask Paul Sylvester, again, Head of Housing Options, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So, as explained in the previous paper, the programme is delivering. We have a good track record of delivery. However, the job isn't done yet. The programme is now seeking approval to draw down funds from the Council's Transformation Fund, pending approval of the Transformation Fund at Strategy and Resources Committee in May 25. to enable it to continue to deliver even more accommodation solutions, continue the prevention work that started, enabled by the Housing Options Service redesign, and to reduce the Council's annual subsidy loss bill even further. So the report sets out the 11 projects and work packages that were in scope of the programme and what is out of scope. It includes a financial summary of the programme, including capital and revenue funding, the 23 financial and non-financial benefits that we anticipate the programme will deliver, the key milestones of the activities in 25-26. And what I did want to say is that completing a full business case does provide the necessary rigour to ensure that the programme activities and financials are well thought through, documented and planned. And I want to thank Joe White, who's sat behind me, Programme Manager, for leading on this detailed piece of work. So in summary, continuing with the work of the programme as set out in the paper just makes sense. The return on investment speaks for itself, just under £2 million to deliver recurring annual savings of over £8 million. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. As I said, this is a key decision, so we will be asked to vote on this in a bit. But first of all, I'd like to present the opportunity for the committee to ask any further questions or make any comments on this report. Councillor Stone.
I just noticed on one of the implementations, it says here, the implementations of home choice allocation policy, the project plan implemented some changes to the home choice allocation policy. Can you explain that for me, please?
Of course, yes, happy to. So 2 or 3 years ago, we did a big consultation on home choice, looking at how it's working, what changes we need to make. And as part of that consultation, we looked at how we can develop a policy that aids us in preventing homelessness. And one of the things that we've recently implemented is the facility where we can support people to stay at home with families and friends through an enhanced banding without the need to go into temporary accommodation. So through that, what we're trying to do is give people a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, that there is hope, there is accommodation. It may take a number of years to get there, but that's just a way of us trying to encourage people to find their own temporary accommodation, stay with families and friends, rather than come into expensive privately managed TA.
Yeah, go on.
So you were able to enhance their banding, is that correct?
So we were able to give them similar banding to what homeless households have, with an enhanced backdating is the specifics. If people continue to stay living with families and friends for a period of time, as a way of incentivising them to continue with that arrangement. I can send the details, it's all in the allocation scheme online.
The reason why I'm asking this is because the policies and procedures about enhancing banding, obviously when we look at Barton House, people are asking for enhanced banding to band 1 and it's been refused under disproportionality. And yet here, I think you're telling me in this report that you were able to enhance people's bandings to give them a light at the end of the tunnel so that they can actually, not go into homelessness.
So I think what we're doing with Barton House is the same as what we did that led to this policy change, was that we're developing proposals, we're going out to public consultation, seeking the advice of a range of people, and then we're taking those proposals through to the decision-making structures, which was Cabinet at the time, for a decision on whether we agree with those or not. So it's the same process, and that took a very long time before to get that done. We're hoping to do it a bit quicker this time.
Thank you. Councillor Eddy.
As you'll be aware, Chairman, this committee is due to receive a report later this year about whether we move ahead with a council-owned RP. And obviously, I'm not seeking to print that detailed report and the work which goes into it. Roughly, could you just outline where roughly we are with that, looking at the options? And in particular, one thing I raised this, with officers separately is, could this be better done by actually working with an existing RP?
Okay, so what I will do is I'll take the last point first, if that's okay, because that speaks to why we're looking at this. So we do work really well with our registered providers, particularly the local registered providers, but there is an accepted lack of capacity within the existing system to deliver the supported housing we need, which is why one of the things that we're looking at is the options of having our own RP. If we could work really hard with the existing section, and we've tried, and RPs have got the same challenges as we have in-house landlord in terms of compliance, standards, etc., then we would do that, because setting up another company is quite a big deal and it's a lot of work. I believe we're at which stage of the business case are we at, Joe? I'm just going to confer with my colleague.
We've done the outline business case, so we're working on the full business case. We've got 3110 out. Okay, fine, yeah. So we've completed the outline business case. We're working on the full business case, and we've got an organisation called 3110 who's supporting us with that work.
Councillor Shabalala.
Thanks. I was going to ask about the RP, so that's one down. In terms of the BEAM contract, is that only for TA and private rent, or is it also for our social housing tenants?
So so BEAM are working with us to help people where we've got a main homelessness duty to move into private rented accommodation and support them into work as well. So it's just for people who are clients who are homeless, okay. either in temporary accommodation or maybe still in their private rented or with families and friends. Yeah.
So not our current tenants in social housing.
No, that's right. No, it's not.
Okay.
No.
And in terms of the sorry, I forgot the things you mentioned. A small site strategy. What are the lessons learned from past kind of allocations to what you think the new small site strategy should have in place? Because there's quite demand and supply and capacity issues there.
Yeah, it's at this point that I wish that my colleague Louise Davison was here, because I'm not really able to answer that question, so I might have to get back to you on that.
That's all right.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'd like to move us on, because we're getting towards time. So I'm going to move in a minute to the recommendations and the vote. I would really encourage members, from my point of view, to vote in favour of these recommendations. The Tackling Homelessness Programme is an extraordinarily positive programme for us as a council and for residents of our city. Not only has it been consistently delivering and in fact over-delivering against financial targets, but it also provides support for households who are at risk of homelessness, helping to prevent people becoming homeless in the first place, and providing better quality accommodation for those who do become homeless. So it's an extremely positive programme, I think, for us as a city. I'm going to, again, for the clarity of the committee, read the recommendations in the report. And that is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes that capital receipts to the value of £45.5 million are required for 25-26 to meet both the capital programme and the transformation, 20.7 million of new spend financing requirements. Formal allocation fund will be requested at the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 25th of May 2025. Each programme or project seeking permission to spend will be required to pursue business case approval in line with the Council's decision-making pathway. Any requests to draw down prior to this agreement will be in principle subject to this paper being approved. Spend up until the 25-26 transformation spend report approval will be within current approvals and rollover of 24-25 transformation funding. The second recommendation that the committee approves in principle drawing down £1,925,947 plus £385,189 contingency funding to be held centrally by Corporate Leadership Board from the Transformation Fund to deliver the Tackling Homelessness full business case, to deliver recurring annual savings of £8,205,606 in 2025-26. That the committee authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in collaboration with the Committee Chair for Homes and Housing Delivery, to carry out all decisions and actions necessary to deliver the full business case appended within the total budget envelope of the programme, including contingency with approval from CLB as stated in the full business case. And finally notes that there will be a further decision sought from the Strategy and Resources Committee on behalf of the New Uses of RPs project, New Uses of Registered Providers, which will request the funding to set up a council-owned registered provider once the full business case and outline business plan has been developed. I move those recommendations. May I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the committee to vote now. Can you please clearly indicate your vote by hand? And first of all, can I ask for votes for the recommendations? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So those recommendations are approved. Thank you. We're going to move on now to agenda item 13, reducing the carbon footprint of Bristol's homes. This report is to inform the committee of the breadth and scale of action being taken by Bristol City Council and the Bristol City Leap Partnership to improve the energy efficiency and reduce the carbon emissions of homes in Bristol. It's also to inform the committee of the actions which the City Council wishes to undertake but does not yet have resources to undertake, and to seek approval of the Bristol City Council Action Plan, Bristol's Warm Homes Plan, a Bristol City Council and Bristol City Leap joint action plan for decarbonising homes. This is a key decision, but it's because it affects 2 or more wards. A briefing was provided to members of this committee as well as to the Environment and Sustainability Committee earlier this week. I'm now going to invite Alex Minshaw, who is Sustainable City and Climate Change Service Manager, to introduce and outline the report.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. And that introduction that the Chair's provided kind of sets the scene for the plan and what we're seeking to do with it, which is partly to address all the homes in the city and to look at the council's role in respect to those and its multiple roles and how we best deliver those roles to both ensure that we have warm homes, but also those homes, the heating of those homes in particular, is reducing its carbon emissions because they're a key part of the emissions of the city. Further plans, more detailed plans, are coming forward for council-owned homes, and that's due to come to this committee in July at the moment, and that will give a lot more detail on the programme that's planned for that. So it's referred to in this document, but not in the detail that you would want to and will receive in shortly. And so obviously heating our homes are about a fifth of the city's, about a third of the city's emissions, just behind transport in terms of the scale of them, and heating of those homes is the key area of those emissions, most of those homes being heated by gas. And so what the plan really focuses on, how can a city transition from having 200,000 homes heated by gas to a similar number of homes heated by different technologies, and those technologies being heat pumps for individual homes and district heating connected to larger heat pumps for larger buildings. And that in essence is the simple strategy, but underpinning that then is the complexity of that huge task. And we've laid out in this document the role that the City Council, and I say role, I keep saying role, it should be multiple roles. There's sort of 7 different roles the City Council's got, from being a landlord and accountable for those homes, to our roles in planning policy, in inspiring and informing and encouraging, and in some cases, and through City Leap and government funding, delivering home improvement programmes and retrofit to privately owned as well as publicly owned homes in the city. And so the plan sets out those roles and explains what we can do, and importantly also what we can't do, and then the Chair said what we would like to do were the resources available for us to do those things. And it also sort of sets out the ways in which we would like to have that change, that transition done, And in terms of ensuring that the transition is made with the right kind of quality of installations of new technologies, and that the transition is done as fairly and justly as possible. And then thirdly, that the benefit of that investment has the most benefit for the economy of the city in terms of jobs and training and skills for the people who live in and around Bristol. And so we've set out that's of how we do it, and the City Council's role in shaping that transition, I think, is quite important, and probably as important as the what we do. So that's the context. The plan then hopefully gives us a platform for communicating what we're doing, but also then seeking further funding from government. And last night at the Environment Committee, they accepted a grant from government for their Warm Homes plan, the nomenclature not being entirely accidental, from the government's Warm Homes investment of some £13 million for retrofit works in and around Bristol. So, but we're hoping that we'll be able to use this document to secure further finance. And that's why the third recommendation then sets out that mandate for officers, the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair, to seek further funding for the range of things which often come about at fairly short notice. And therefore that ability to respond to what the committee has agreed as a set of strategic priorities will be really helpful, we think. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think this is a really important report, and I think one of the reasons why it's so important is because it lays out the scale of the challenge that we have as a city in decarbonising our homes, and the importance that has for our emissions overall. It's a huge proportion of our city's emissions. And I think something else that's also very important about this report is it really it demonstrates why it's so necessary for us as a local authority to be at the heart of this energy transition. And that's really for two reasons. One is because of the capacity that we have through our status as a landowner, as a landlord, as a centre of capacity to be able to make this transition and be able to sort of pull the levers that we need to in order to decarbonise our homes. But also because as an organisation with equity and fairness at its heart, we are able to work towards a just transition, something that the market won't deliver on its own. I'm going to ask members if you'd like to make any comment or ask any questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Bales.
My question is about installing these heat networks from a council tenant's perspective. Obviously, we've already got them in high rises and they work really well and they do their job. But if you're in a council house, like, are you going to do streets at a time? And how would that work if you've got a mix of council-owned properties and some that have been bought by the tenants and they're now in the private sector? How would that work?
Yeah, so the heat networks really need a density of heat demand because the cost of laying the pipework is quite high. And so at the moment, the target really is for the central areas of the city where you've got a high heat demand for every kilometre of pipe that you have to lay. And so that density, that heat demand comes from more dense buildings, so therefore blocks of apartments and commercial buildings and public institutions like City Hall. And so that's where the focus of the heat network is at the moment, in those sub-central areas, and the sort of forthcoming government regulations around heat network zones. We've done a lot of modelling around where heat network zones would be most suitable, and again, not surprisingly, it is around those denser areas. So we're not currently planning the rollout of heat networks into what you might think of as more suburban areas of lower rise individual homes. And for those sorts of homes, the appropriate technology is likely to be the individual heat pumps attached to each individual property in the same way as they have an individual gas boiler now.
So when, like, as a council tenant, you're not going to put these heat networks in, so we'll continue to have ordinary gas boilers.
And so the I think the detailed strategy for the council homes is coming forward from colleagues in Housing Landlord Services, and I know Sam and the team are working very hard on those details. So I wouldn't want to preempt that, say things that I don't know enough about for his work that's coming forward in say in just a couple of months' time.
Yeah, that's right. So we will have a paper on that strategy coming to this committee soon. Councillor Stone.
Oh, hi, thanks, Alex. I've got quite a few questions, actually, but I'll try and keep it to a minimum. First of all, I'd just like to understand the loanology, because I think it's a really good idea. I just want you to be very, very clear on what that means. So in the report, there's loanology that's describing how we can provide loans to citizens, because one of our main objectives is to obviously decarbonise all of our homes right across the city, not just our council homes. So how does the loanology kind of like framework work? I'll start off with that one.
Can I perhaps invite Tom to comment on that lendology?
Yeah, the lendology scheme is available to assist low-income residents improve their properties, and it's principally focused on residents who have very low incomes but are unable to borrow from traditional banks and lending institutions. They will run a scheme to establish whether a profile to make sure people qualify and are obviously able then to repay the loan over whatever the loan period is. It runs up to a maximum of 15 years. You know, the reality is once that loan is agreed and drawn down, the works can be done, and over a period of time, the loan period, the works are then repaid. It's been in our loan housing renewal financial assistance programme for many years. Lendology has been in place for as a scheme since 2006. So many years, they have a lot of experience in supporting clients through the programme, and where they get into difficulty, if their circumstances change, they will try and support them, enabling that loan to be repaid over the loan period.
So my second question to that would be is how many people are taking that offer up to actually transform their homes, to decarbonise their homes and retrofit their homes?
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for loans, but we can certainly find that number for you and come back to you at a later meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'd like reminders to members, if you have follow-up questions, please come through the chair. I've got Councillor Shabalala next.
Chair, may I just add the response for Councillor Stone?
Sure.
So obviously the lendology is a product service that suits certain groups of people, and so what we're looking at is how do we have the full range of products and services that can or the market provide the right kind of financial instruments for each individual group of people who have very different needs. And so that's a combination of grants, so that we were talking about grants last night at the Environment Committee being provided from government funding. We've got some loans which are may or may to some extent subsidised or not, and then there will be more commercially orientated products. And so we're working on a number of things. How do we ensure that there's a route to retrofit for everybody?
Thank you. We've got Councillor Shabalala next, and then Councillor P.
Thank you, Chair. Let me see, do I have one? I've got two questions. Yeah. Right, so City Leap, right? I think I love the concept. However, when looking at the deliverables at the ground level from people that see these big budgets, aspirational projects, they don't necessarily see them on the ground. £2 million worth of community energy development fund that really could have been better utilized for supporting some of those organizations with community assets strategically, without applications and so forth. So I'd like to see more strategic, intentional work from City Leap to engage with the public health team and actually support organizations with assets. Because what this does is that it impacts on people applying on the community infrastructure levy, whilst there's an internal scheme that could do that. So one is more that strategic part. The other part is really it's good to see the potential of the solo grant for Bristol schools. I think that's important. It's just really thinking about our estate, our stocks, our partners, and how we can be quite intentional in bringing the service to them versus saying, come and apply to us. We've got enough data to know where we should go, as opposed to people saying, come to us, because that increases levels of exclusion. So I'd like to see a bit more intentionality. Additional, most of this is a little bit outside of the topic of today, but you're representing with that City Leap hats. The social value that sits within City Leap and its core partners is one of the highest in terms of our surplus partners. It's just hard to see. It's just hard to see how that is social value close to 100,000 in 2021 has kind of linked with our most deprived communities in terms of really getting engaged with the conversations around green skills, energy retrofitting, as we're talking about the education program around heat, right? This could be the partner that delivers that. I'm not sure we're actually seeing that on the ground.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. So I'm not the City Leap client manager, but I will take those points and share them with Helen, and perhaps she can have a follow-up conversation with you to look at those more specifically. I will just sort of reflect on a couple of points. The community grant scheme that City Leap, our partners in City Leap, created with their money, and they've created the process by which that has been then awarded. One of the things, just the sort of scale of that resource, is the similar fund nationally is £10 million, and we've now got a fund in Bristol that's 1.5 million, and so there is something about the scale of it that's very, very strong. And I hear your notes about the way in which it's been awarded and marketed and engagement. So I'll take that feedback back, and obviously it may well be that Helen would like to follow up more specifically so she can understand the specifics of that with you.
Okay. I've got Councillor Peat next, and then I think we'll have to finish with Councillor Thomas afterwards.
So, with the recent budget, I am concerned that properties brought forward for auction are going to be the most difficult and/or expensive to make energy efficient, and therefore we won't be able to force the new owners to make these properties more energy efficient, potentially meaning that we won't meet our net zero targets. Can we have assurances that the council won't just sell off the most difficult or expensive properties to retrofit?
So Councillor Peat, I think you're referring to the disposals programme, which we approved in outline at the budget recently. That will be coming with a fully worked out policy at a later date. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Ross. So, really good report. I think the objectives that you've got, you kind of talk about key roles on page 45 of your report. Feels like having that future focus could sit right at the front of the report, so that we're kind of really looking at the actions required. I think the carbon savings for each of those areas, you've got that big picture link into what's required to get to zero carbon Bristol, but when we're looking at what we're trying to do, having a sense of both the carbon savings that we're making in our activities and the future carbon savings that are possible would be great to bring in over time, and I know it's difficult. I wanted to ask how this links with the zero carbon ambitions, because it's for example, we've got so how does this, because you've got reporting coming back on how we're getting to zero carbon Bristol, but where does this fit in that mix?
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. So, and in terms of the last point, so we've been developing a series of plans that set out how we achieve that carbon neutrality, and we're trying to, and there's two layers to that really. One is how does the city as a whole do it, and then what's the city council's role in achieving that, and both where it's got, if you like, core responsibilities, so our landlord roles, for example, and then where we've got the sort of softer influence, facilitatory skills, roles. And so in some way, this is if we think about the One City Climate Strategy as the overarching document, it sets out some very high level ambitions. We've got a One City Action Plan that similarly sets out the sort of next layer down of major programs that are needed to achieve those. And then this is the next layer down of, so for this group of, for homes, this part of the emission profile, these are the things the City Council is going to do over the next few years. So it's a layers of detail that we're trying to lay out, and also get a sense of the City Council is responsible and can be held accountable for the delivery of the things in this action plan, because they relate to things which it is able to do. Some of the things in the high level of the city things are things that we're not able to do or indeed perhaps influence much. And so if we think of in other areas, the commercial emissions of the city are almost entirely outside the gift of the City Council, and except for a little bit of influence through the planning system on the small proportion of buildings that are built each year. So it's trying to be really clear in terms of that very complicated system where we can be most effective using our powers, competencies and influence to have the most effect on accelerating that journey, recognising that we can't be held accountable for the entire performance of the city.
Thank you. And Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. There's so much I actually do want to ask you, Alex, so maybe if you and I could actually have a conversation outside of this. But the one thing I want to actually get onto the report is actually our link up with skilling up our young people. Now, the reason why I'm asking this is because so many of our skilled tradespeople are actually leaving the business, as you're probably well aware. The government at the moment is funding level 3 courses for upskilling those people, but then they're moving out of the trades. So, upskilling these people is not kind of happening. And what the government is not doing is funding for fresh new people to come into these trades from a level 1, level 2 and level 3 progression skills courses. Now, so you've made a lot of references about skilling and making sure we've got skilled and trained people to actually provide and do the job. But I'm telling you here right now, Alex, it's just not happening at all. And that's something that we really need to try and figure out how we're going to do this by lobbying government to provide more funding.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Do you want to come back on that?
I will agree with you on the importance of those skills and the challenges. There are a number of programmes which the Combined Authority is delivering on those areas, and also which we're delivering through an initiative called Mission Net Zero, and some innovation funding, and very happy to bring a briefing on that project to members. But yes, it is an important and complicated landscape area.
Okay. I'm going to move us on now. The first thing I'm going to do is to read out the officer recommendations. As I said, this is a key decision, so I'm going to be asking the committee to vote on these recommendations. And they are as follows. That the Committee for Homelessness notes the breadth and scale of actions being taken by Bristol City Council and Bristol City Leap to improve the energy efficiency and reduce the carbon footprint of homes in Bristol. It notes the actions in the plan which the City Council wishes to undertake but does not yet have resources to undertake. Approves the Bristol City Council Action Plan for Decarbonising Bristol's homes, and authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee and the Section 151 officer, to seek those resources from appropriate external sources, making funding bids as appropriate, accept and spend such funding, and to implement projects in line with the action plan, including any funding and projects which may be over the key decision threshold. I move those report recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, sorry. Councillor Peat. So, now I'm going to ask the committee to vote on these recommendations. Again, could you please clearly indicate your vote by hand? And first of all, I'm going to ask for votes for the recommendations. And I think that's unanimous, is that right? Yeah, great, thank you. So those are approved. Thank you very much. And we're moving on now to our last item. That's agenda item 14, outcomes of the Central Additional Licensing Scheme. So this report is to inform the committee about the outcomes of the Central Additional Licensing Scheme, which covered the period from the 8th of July 2019 to the 18th of December 2024. This is a non-key decision, and I'm going to invite Tom Gilchrist, Head of Service for Private Housing, Accessible Homes and Travellers, to introduce and outline this report. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. As Barry has alluded to, this is a report to bring you, to provide you with an update on the outcomes for the Central Area Licensing Scheme. Obviously, the report was included in your pack, and I hope you've had an opportunity to read the contents of the report. And there's a lot of statistical information in the report, which obviously I'm going to make reference to as we go through the report today. I think you can see from the report there have been significant improvements across the private rented sector in the central area throughout the life of the scheme, which ended in 2024. As I said, there's a significant amount of specific information in the tables in the report, but there's a couple of areas that I just want to focus your mind on. That 97% of properties inspected did not meet licensing conditions, which actually really, almost every property we've looked at haven't met those conditions. And 73% of those properties required improvements to make them safe and meet fire safety requirements. So, and given those requirements, those improvements have made improvements. Excuse me, can I just bear with me for a minute? I want to pick out something in my bag that's beeping. Right, sorry about that. Sorry, Chair. So as you can see, those improvements have made significant improvements for residents of those properties to make them safe. And that numbers, that 73% of properties being made safe for fire safety improvements, actually is key to making people safe in multiple occupied buildings, which are one of the higher, most risk areas for the city, for residents in the city. During those inspections, where appropriate, enforcement action has been taken during the life of the scheme to make sure the properties are safe. And during the life of the scheme, one landlord was banned from operating, and that particular landlord had significant 7 or 8 properties in the city. The licensing scheme runs for a period of 5 years, and although the scheme itself has ended, the licensing conditions will run beyond the life of the scheme. So there are properties that, where residents have raising concerns, we have the ability to go back and inspect even now. Over the licensing period, the scheme saved, although was financially sound, it generated a tiny deficit of £28,000. And again, I'm happy to take questions on the details around that, and if members want to discuss that in more details. But I think the outcomes of the scheme have shown that the scheme was clearly set. There was a real need for inspections and improvements of those rented properties in the 12 wards of the city that the scheme operated over, and the scheme has delivered the outcomes that we set in the original objectives. So, very brief overview of the scheme. More than happy to take questions from members if they have any.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I think some of the statistics that Tom's mentioned really sort of bear out the importance of licensing as a tool that we have to improve standards in the private rented sector in our city really significantly, and to make sure that that residents living in the private rented sector are safe, and that the properties they inhabit are decent. And that's I think that's it's a really important lesson from this scheme, and something that we need to take forward into when we're considering current and future licensing schemes as well. So I'm going to open up to questions and comments now, and I'm going to start with Councillor Peat.
Thank you. I think it's good to know that this scheme that was implemented by the previous administration has been able to shine such a huge light on this sector. Obviously, 80% of the licensed properties had breached regulations. However, only 669 had their licenses revoked. I'm aware that for a lot of these, it was just very minor breaches, but could we possibly have a breakdown or an overview of the different types of breaches that we did see from the 80%?
I'm sure we can break those breaches down for you. I've got Paul Tregale, the licensing manager, sitting behind me. I'll ask him if he has that information. I doubt it, but I'll ask him.
Yes, so the 80% relates to some kind of specific regulations around the management of the properties. So it's quite confusing, but there are various different elements to the license. So there are the compliance with the HMO management regulations. So those regulations cover a range of things, from kind of maintenance of common parts, maintenance of individual rooms, for example. But then within the license, they also have to comply with license conditions and hazards. So within those 80% of management regs, we wouldn't probably be able to break those down. We literally have to look at every single record. But what I can say is those 80% are relating to the management rather than necessarily around hazards. So the hazards would be separate to that.
Is it possible I can do a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it possible that we could get a report on a kind of breakdown in future?
Yeah, I'm sure that we can bring you those extra details if you want them. And certainly, you know, coming out of this meeting,
yeah,
I'll ask Paul and the team to look to see whether we can break the those offences down and those details down in the detail that so we can provide you with more detail around your question.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peat. Councillor Shabalala.
Thanks. I always like the detail that you guys provide. It would be great to get ward profile of some of the cases that you found. And what I'd like to just kind of check is that obviously now in terms of social housing, we've got the regulator. If we continued this, then it's like, you know, we're providing some reassurances for private renting. I think that just makes sense, because then that means in terms of housing, we've got a standard that we expect on both arms. Would there be a recommendation to continue this? And if so, how should we go about doing that?
Well, I can provide some reassurance that there is the standard, the housing health and safety rating system applies across all tenures, so that applies both in the council housing sector but also to the private rented sector. And certainly as far as feedback to the regulatory compliance, I'm pretty sure that Richard and his colleagues will in future be providing information on HHSRS compliance in the social housing sector. So that's one element. The second part of your question, could you just ask that again?
Could we bring this back again?
Yes, I was going to say, we have, as you probably are aware, other licensing schemes in operation currently, one of which started back in August of this year, or sorry, of 2024. And we will be bringing, fun enough, we have recently just got a date in the diary for later this year to bring you an update on the Bedminster, Brislington, Weston, Horfield scheme. So we will be bringing that in October. That's the scheduled date to give you an update, because that scheme is now halfway through operation. And we will obviously provide you with, bring further reports on the citywide licensing scheme that's now in operation, covering all HMOs. And I should say that the HMOs that are covered in this scheme will have to reapply for a new licence under the citywide additional licensing scheme. So again, that information will be brought to you in due course, probably halfway through that scheme life. And an update will also be brought on the selective licensing schemes that are covering the 3 wards, covering Cottam, Bishopston and Ashley Down and Easton, which are part of the selective licensing scheme that was approved last year.
I love that. I really do. Because one of the core things that we must ensure is safety in homes, and people to feel well within the homes that they're in. And I think this kind of brings that sure principle that as a city we care, and for the landlords to also show that they are quite conscious that we care. So this is amazing to see, and I look forward to the rest of the reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
It's just a quick one, and I'm sure you know the answer to this, Tom. But please explain it to everybody, especially if there's anybody listening. Why is it that we're not developing a licensing scheme rather citywide, not just for HMOs, but for private rented accommodation, if these breaches, because these breaches are often minor, you know, as we've probably discussed, but even those minor breaches where, say, there's a heat alarm when there should be, or a smoke alarm where there should be a heat alarm, or there's not a carbon dioxide meter in where there should be, these kind of little ones are usually then put in place if there's a licensing scheme, and that would be really beneficial to everybody. So why is it not citywide?
There is a licensing scheme in operation now, as I mentioned to the last question, that covers citywide HMOs, houses in multiple occupation. And that probably is where the majority of the residents in the city are living in those buildings. There's not currently a licensing scheme for all other properties, that's singly occupied buildings. And obviously, as part of the exit strategy to future licensing schemes, we will need to review whether it is appropriate to bring forward further licensing schemes. So that will probably form part of future reports that will be brought to committee over the forthcoming years. But certainly, you know, given that we have got in the region of 18,000 properties to inspect over the next 3 or 4 years, I'm sure Paul and his team will be busy. But as those schemes come to an end, we will be looking to potentially bring forward reports on future opportunities to do licensing, whether that's local area based or across a city. I think the challenge we've always got with citywide licensing is being able to justify it and meet the eligibility criteria that legally we've got to do to withstand challenge. But, you know, as we bring forward those reports, obviously the committee members will have an opportunity to consider the reasons why we're bringing just for those areas and whether they want to consider expanding them.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring us to a close, but before I do, does anyone have any final points they'd like to make? Yes. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, on the basis that there's we're seeing quite a number of developments coming through for co-living, which, you know, most people is because of poor quality in some of the HMOs. I think having the standard then reassures people that if they're not getting into the co-living, those accommodations are also quite user-friendly. So I think it is really good for the market. It balances the market, and it actually spreads it out. So really great stuff. Again, yeah, that's all.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's really valuable to have this report, and we'll be having future reports on the outcomes of other schemes. I think they will help us to inform our deliberations when we are considering those opportunities for potential future uses of licensing that Tom's outlined. You know, as I said at the start, I think this is a really important and valuable tool for us as a council, and I think it's really it's good that we're learning about how these schemes work and the impacts they can have, so that we can inform ourselves on our future decisions. So thank you. I'm going to move now to the officer recommendations, which are pretty straightforward on this one for the clarity of the committee, and that's simply that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the outcomes of the Central Additional Licensing Scheme as laid out in and that is the end of the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and your participation. Thanks very much, everyone.